All right. What feature are you going to go to on SPY this morning?
So let me share my screen here. So what we'll do is maybe um cover these IV leans. We did a webinar on it, but I think that
Actually, we did have a question pop up. I don't know if you want to
sure.
go to it.
Okay.
Cincy, who just got back from vacation, is asking, since we are getting underway in the prime earnings season, maybe you could show us how you'd walk through the calendar, maybe what's coming up with the earnings calendar, how you use it. This is his question.
Okay. So the questions on the earnings calendar.
Yeah, I think we're in the maybe the second week of earnings season.
Yep. Okay. So in here in the earnings calendar, the idea here is really to try to keep track of companies that are reporting earnings and companies that are about to report earnings or they're coming up with expected earnings releases. And you could also go back in history, you if you wanted to go back and say what would happen on October 21st or October 20th. So this calendar kind of lets you do that type of analysis. When you come to the earnings calendar, the default date is the most current date. Okay. With earnings. So right now we're on October 22nd. So now we have a list of companies over here. These are stock symbols and stock names of companies that are expected to report earnings today, sometime today. Um, And we'll just cover really quickly, from left to right, what these data elements mean. So we could understand, what we're looking at, basically. So stock symbol, name, it's pretty self-explanatory, GE Aerospace. The earnings date, that's today, October 22nd. Okay. And then we have this BMO, and you'll have like AMC. And sometimes you might even have something, different. But BMO stands for before market opens. In other words, they're expected to report earnings, you know, sometime before the market officially opens 9:30. So when we get a press release in the morning that they reported earnings, if we detect that press release and it gets put into our system, it will show up in this column, press release, with a time stamp when the press release was issued. So this allows you to click on it if you want to read the actual press release. So if like I click on it, all right, now here's Dana reports third quarter results, and then you could read about it, right? Your net earnings and so forth. So this is uh, you know, their press release from the company that they issued, and you could go through it and read through their earnings and do your analysis. Okay. So we're going to come back to here. Um, AMC stands for aftermarket close. So if you're looking at the calendar in the morning or during the day, right, when you're doing that, it gives you a chance to take any action that you would want to do prior to an earnings release, right? Maybe, you know, take off some risk. Maybe you want to do a hedge. Maybe you want to uh, uh, look for potential earnings opportunities or earnings trade opportunities. But this gives you a heads up that, hey, there's a stock here, we're expecting after the market close. And if it's still during the trading day or, prior to the market close, it gives you a chance to go look at the markets and uh, you know, do any trades that you think. fit your analysis. Now, next to that, right, we have this conference call. So sometimes, as you could see, when I clicked on this, right, I clicked on the press release, and you get this data, right? So now we got this data, this was prepared data, that they issued, and it's talking about usually, like financials. There's an outlook here. It gives you a chance to read it. However, many times, not all the time, but many times, there's also a conference call with the management. So the conference call could also add an additional layer of potential information that could be a catalyst for a move, because it gives a chance for the management to maybe discuss the actual results, explain it better, answer investor or analyst questions, maybe give outlook, talk about things that provide more clarity, or talk about things that may not yet, be reflected in this press release, right? Because you don't know, there could be, good questions that may reveal something new. So why that's important is if we're looking at a earnings, here's an example one right here, Rima. They reported earnings at 8 a.m. So we could go to the press release and we could see it, and then we could, based on whatever this, it's telling us actually to go to their website, but based on this, right, we could put those numbers into our models. We could interpret it, whatever, and then come up with a new fair value, and the stock moves, right? Look, so right now, if I go all the way to the right, the stock in the pre-market's up 1.3%. That's what this is, this move. So as soon as we detect that a press release was issued, they reported earnings, we detected that happens, we start tracking what did the stock do relative to where it closed prior to earnings. So in the pre-market, it's up 1.3% so far. Okay. Well, this here is telling us that they're expected to have a conference call at 10 a.m. All right. So FCI, let me see if this is still in there. So here we go. Look, FCX will host a conference call today with securities analysts at 10 a.m. Eastern. So what that means is that even though we're looking at this 1.3% move, there's a potential for another volatility event. At 10 a.m., they're going to have this conference call. I don't know how long it's going to last. It could last 10 minutes, it could half hour, whatever it is. We don't know what so far is going to happen in it. But looking at this, you have now potential for another, catalyst move that may either, add to the existing move, may not do anything, they may not say anything, or they could say something where people reverse or, change their mind about, the earnings based on what's said. Things could look very good, but maybe there's a question there and the management says, well, there's this issue we have potentially, and going forward, or reveal something that could reverse it. So that's why we add these conference calls, because those are, again, an important catalyst event. So going next to it, for reference, right, we say, well, all right, how did the stock do in the previous move, right? Just like if we just look at the previously. What did the stock do? Just for a quick reference, and then we list the percentage move, right? So that's just one move, the last one. But if you hover over it, you're like this one was up 23%. So you hover over it, and this is how it behaved previously, right? That doesn't mean it's going to do it again, but just for reference, you have that there. And because that's the most recent move, right? That's what it did most recently. Then next to it, we have this expected percentage move in either direction, right? So what is that? We don't know what the stock will actually do because it needs to happen. We don't know. Nobody knows, how traders are going to behave after an earnings release. You got many different traders, acting on the stock. Earnings are released. You're going to have professional traders, retail traders, hedge funds. You got all these people looking at it and trading based on their own unique opinions. So there's no way to know what's going to happen. Now, we don't know what's going to happen, but the market itself, right, has these forward-looking instruments that give us indications how the market consensus is prior to earnings. Now, when we look at options, right, the options themselves are more like, volatility based, the magnitude of the move. So we could look at the option straddle, right? We don't know, if it's more bullish or bearish from this, but we could get a sense of the magnitude of the move. Are they expecting a big move or a small move? And is it a big move or small move relative to historical moves? So this is what the expected move is. It's looking at the nearest term option straddle and saying based on those surrounding options, right? The model. So we have this model that's looking through all this, giving it different weights based on the strikes, and then it says based on these surrounding options, what is the market consensus, the expected move here around, right? So we come up with this average number, right? It's probably more like a range because you got bids and offers and stuff, but we come up with this average number, and that's what this expected move is. So for example, in FCX, the straddle was implying a move of 4.4%. And that expected move is really based on, where the buyers and sellers of the straddle would break even if the stock moved that much. And this really just quickly, if some people were looking for bigger moves, some are small moves, some are just, just quick reference of how did it move prior to this. So that's what this expected or implied move is indicating. You could, sort it even, I think, by this column, so like big moves, small moves. I think we have it sorted, auto sorted by market cap. That's the default. So now, so those are the three numbers. And once this number here, this move, this will track that stock throughout the day. So once earnings comes out, it starts tracking the stock's price relative to the previous, close before earnings. That's what it's tracking. So these numbers could change. This is just where it's currently, right? But these numbers could change because it has all the way to the end of the day of trading. These numbers could keep going to the same side. They could close, they could reverse. But this is just tracking as the day goes on. So the option volume here, right now it's all zeros, but that's tracking the option volume on the day. So once we start getting option volume data, we process it in our system, and then this will give us the aggregate option volume. And the idea there is just to see if which things are kind of busy or have a lot of trading activity throughout the day. So you could have earnings, but if you with very low option volume, let's go here. We'll go for the previous day. October 21st is yesterday. So these were yesterday's earnings, but you could see, sometimes you have very low option volume, like in this case, 908 contracts traded in ARE. But here's one, Nucor traded 19,500 contracts. Here's one traded 61,000 contracts in the day. So even though you have earnings, if you're looking for options that are actively trading and maybe have more liquidity, perhaps, because trading could create opportunities, that this just gives you throughout the day what the option volume looks like. All right. So let's come back. And then finally, just the market cap just allows us to see, if you sort it, some people just like bigger market cap stocks have some, secret sorters, some don't care, or if you have that, ability to see that on this earnings calendar. So that's pretty much, that's the earnings calendar from this point of view. If you, let's say, have a particular stock that you wanted to look at, I think you could type it into here, let's say GE. So here, let's say we wanted to look at a longer history, and without leaving this calendar, we type in that symbol in there. And here we see, upcoming projected earnings. So this is the next one we're talking about and are projected going forward, because unless the company announces the actual dates, we don't know. So the next best thing is we look at the history, the pattern of how they reported, and try to project the next ones, which that's the next best thing. But it's important to try to understand when they will report earnings, especially if you're trading options, because options that cover earnings will be priced differently than options that don't cover earnings. Okay, so if we don't know, the next thing we could do is try to project it, so at least we have a sense of which options, we don't want to underprice or overprice potentially, try to get an estimate there. But
we just had someone come in, asked if you could type in Tesla, TSLA, to see when their next earnings is.
So here's Tesla. It's October 23rd. Right after the market closed, and so far the straddle's implying 6.8% move. And here you just have, going back in history, and you don't need to go, I don't think we need to go all the way back here, but even if we look at the most recent, we could see, how Tesla performed. They're expecting 9.2% move, it moved 12%. They're expecting 9.3%, moved up 12%. So you could see here that, at least here, the Tesla even looks like a lot of times, moved above where the expectations were, as far as magnitude of the move. But this is the upcoming, and if you hover over it, you get a little bit more data where you could see, it goes 2 days of data before earnings, just to give you a sense of how it traded into the earnings. And then after reporting earnings, it gives you 2 days of data to give you a sense of how it was impacted after earnings. So this is just a quick way to, hover over and get an idea of okay, what did it tend to do into the earnings and how did it behave after? So if you hover over it, you can see that here. So let me just close. And if you close this over here, it takes it back to the earnings calendar. You do have some filters here. If If you have a watch list, you could filter by your watch list. If you have a stock screener and you saved a stock screener, like let's say you have a certain, I don't know, PE ratio, certain requirement for average option volume, a certain requirement for stock volume, or it has to be part of it in S&P 500. If you save that in your stock screener and you gave it a name, you could filter it in here. Just your own unique thing. Okay. Here, this default is looking at earnings that we see an announcement, press release. If you're looking for maybe that any like things that we didn't see a press release, but we anticipate, you could change that filter. There's preliminary earnings. So here's a preliminary earning. This isn't earnings where they announce it, but then there's going to be another announcement potentially later for the same quarter. Guidance, revisions. So this gives you these are projected earnings that we don't have an announcement, but we're saying that based on history, these should be coming up soon, right? So we don't know when, they didn't announce it, but these are close to where we're in the range they could happen anytime. And then the announce. So we're right up at 9:30. I think I will stop there.
Yeah, that's awesome, D. We did have a question about calendar spreads and how you can identify possible win rates. I sent that over for maybe tomorrow's show. A couple people thought that'd be interesting.
Yep.
Great job as always. Thanks for the questions, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks, D.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe out there. Have a great day and hope to see you guys tomorrow.
Trading Peace community.